of the world prophecy number 1, setting the stage for the final curtain on America. Hello, Cthulhu Fatagan, welcome. With the current state of the world and another election year coming up, which so many people seem to think the end of the world is every 4 years now, we thought it was our duty as the leaders of the First United Church of Cthulhu to throw out some prophecies. We can revisit them in 5 or 10 years and either have a good laugh and we will happily say that we were wrong, or we will take a few moments to gloat and say we told you so. Henry Rollins started seeing the signs 40 years ago. He said, "In the 80s, I saw what was happening with money. I was watching it shift very quickly. I was watching the middle class go away. And I was a 23-year-old maniac, but I got it. And that's when I realized, you better get plan B, C, D, E, F, and G, otherwise you're gonna starve to death in the America. The America is not a place you live in, it's a video game that you survive. I'm not only an American, I'm an Americanist. I survive the America, in spite of what it wants to do to people like me." The first thing you have to wrap your head around is that the world, at least the one that you think you know, has already ended. It has been dead and gone for more than 2 decades now. There is no exact moment or event in the wibbly-wobbly quantum foam of reality when it occurred, but there is a pretty good and balanced build-up and cool-down. Ironically, America was compromised in 1976, the bicentennial of the founding of the greatest country on the planet. And we were sold out by our own countrymen. It starts a little bit further back in 1886 in the Supreme Court case of Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad, in which the court rules that the 14th Amendment applied to corporations, giving them the same rights as individuals. This gave corporations personhood. Jump back to 1976 in the Supreme Court case of Buckley versus Valeo, in which they ruled that expenditure limits on political donations were a restriction on the First Amendment provision of freedom of speech. Thus the cap for such transactions was removed. You could now give as much money as you wanted to a politician. This effectively legalized bribery. Then, in 1978, the Supreme Court case of First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti, in which they defined the free speech right of corporations for the first time. This is the big one that determined that corporate money is free speech, thus it legalized corporate bribery of politicians. Political activist Ralph Nader, who was there at the time, explained what happened. He said the Democrats were appalled by the decision, but all the Republicans were immediately on board and started taking bribes. Within 2 years, all the Democrats were on board as well and taking bribes. 1980 was the beginning of the end. Inflation was at its highest point in American history. Housing prices in California were already triple the national average. Continuing gas shortages. Continuing high unemployment rates. And to this day, the baby boomers still won't admit that it happened on their watch. The reason the 1980s are looked back on so fondly is because the corrupt politicians understood the timeless societal advice of keeping the peasants happy. It was the modern equivalent of the ancient Roman writer Juvenal, who deplored the declining heroism of Romans after the Roman Republic ceased to exist and the Roman Empire began. He said, "2 things only the people anxiously desire: bread and circuses." An overuse of sugar and high fructose corn syrup poisons the bread, but keeps our bellies full with an explosion of entertaining distractions to poison our minds. They began artificially pumping up the GDP to make Wall Street and the economy seem like they were succeeding. This allowed them to artificially raise the rate of inflation every year. I can't even tell you how many news reports I saw during that time calling them out on their economic bullshit. But nobody cared. And since nobody was looking, this is also when wages began to stagnate, going on 40 years now of nearly flat wage increases. Then in the 90s, President Bill Clinton was able to accomplish all the dastardly things that the Republicans tried but failed to do. He deregulated transportation, banking, trade, airlines, broadcasting, and telecommunications. Basically, the fucking piece of shit legalized monopolies pretty much across the board. So the big banks and other scumbag investment firms like BlackRock began to buy up or buy into every single kind of business in the country. And that's why we no longer have a free press. The corporations bought up all the TV stations and news channels. And that brings us evenly, and ironically, to the end of the world as you and I knew it, the year 2000. The millennials are the last generation in that chapter of American history. No matter how you measure the past, the future will never be that way again. Gen Z are the first fully digital generation. In 2001 we got 9/11. President Retard W. Bush was conveniently about as far away as he could be that morning, down in Florida playing story time with a classroom of second graders, which is just about his reading level. I still blame Cheney. But that led to the Patriot Act a month later. Congress gave the U.S. military carte blanche to invade any country with no declaration of war if it was in pursuit of stopping terrorism. Did you understand what I just said? Any country. We can roll into England, or France, or Japan, or China, or Korea, or Australia, or India, or anywhere else we want with the flimsy excuse of stopping terrorism. And it is still in effect. Then boom shakalaka, Obama took us from 2 wars to 7. Oh wait, excuse me, they're not wars, they're anti-terrorist campaigns. In Korea and Vietnam, they called them police actions. Let me be perfectly clear, and I come from a big military family. The United States has not fought in a just war since World War II. They have all been invasions at the behest of the military-industrial complex so that they could keep the money rolling in. Our tax money. That we now spend over $1 billion a year on, as well as the intelligence community and national security agencies, of which I believe there are 27 now. Then 2020 was the final nail in the coffin, finalizing the possible decline and destruction of the American empire. Remember those checks for $600 you got? Well, the big corporations got trillions of dollars in bailouts, while small businesses were forced to shut down and received nothing, many never opening again. And now we've come full circle back to 1980 with high unemployment rates. They are lying to you about all the economic numbers. If you didn't know, inflation is at its second highest rate in history. Gas prices are through the roof. But now they've added food prices on top of that, some items doubling or tripling in price. They're not even letting us have the bread anymore. And the whole fucking country is a circus now. Truly, truly, we live in clown world. As president, you elected a game show host in 2016, then an Alzheimer's patient in 2020. As the first new generation, I can't blame the kids for hating all of us who came before them and fucked everything up or sat idly by while it was going on. I was waving that red battle flag for a good 20 years, but my compatriots in Gen X, who at one time told the boomers to fuck off, and we made our own businesses and our own jobs and our own parallel economy. They went to sleep and joined the boomers in their oblivion. And the millennials were too busy getting beaten into the ground by the boomers, where 90% of all new jobs from 2005 to 2020 were either part-time or gig work. They never explained to you how loans work, so a lot of you fools gleefully signed your future away for a college-stamped piece of paper that is now worthless. Then all the closed businesses in 2020, and now all the ones who can't survive with the inflation rates. The millennials were too busy doing what they were told, to sit down and shut up, and pay no attention to that man behind the curtain who is robbing you blind of all your generational wealth and economics. So you see, we lost the game a long time ago. Now the banks and corporations are just wringing us out like a cartoon character to get the last few coins from our pockets. Every generation has their geniuses and a lot of complete fucking idiots, and Gen Z will be no exception. But I see in them what the 3 generations before had very little of: hope. Just like Pandora's box, we have let the monsters out, but at the bottom of the box there was one thing left: hope. Corruption and treachery can no longer hide in the digital era, and the internet never forgets. I love my parents, they're fucking awesome, but history will not look back fondly on their generation. The hippies failed miserably. If only just because all the boomers will finally be gone, it will fall on Gen Z to fix everything. And I'm going to help them. Make no mistake, the next 10 to 20 years are going to be bleak as fuck. We'll make it through, but for a lot of other countries it will be the literal end of the world. And I'll go over all that in the upcoming prophecies. I've got like 15 of them, but it's not all doom and gloom, and I'll tell you what you can do to try and make it through. These will be years in hell, and the world will change very rapidly, and you will not recognize the future. Nostalgia is a trap, and many will choose to dither away their years living in the past. Meanwhile, the rest of us will be rebuilding the better tomorrow. But there's a great part in the film Jacob's Ladder that perfectly explains what the world is going through.
I was in hell. I don't want to die, Louis.
Well, I'll see what I can do about it.
It's all pain.
You ever read Meister Eckhart?
No.
Eckhart saw hell, too. You know what he said? He said the only thing that burns in hell is the part of you that won't let go of your life. Your memories, attachments, they burn them all away. But they're not punishing you, he said. They're freeing your soul. So the way he sees it, if you're frightened of dying and you're holding on, you'll see devils tearing your life away. But if you've made your peace, then the devils are really angels, freeing you from the earth. It's just a matter of how you look at it, that's all. So don't worry, okay? Okay?
Now smash that like button. Can I get a Cthulhu Fatagen down in the comments? Yeah. And be sure to subscribe for more horror, occult, and Lovecraft madness. Until next time, Cthulhu Fatagen.